Hello everyone, ToadKnight here, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite JRPG franchises of all time, the Atelier series. This is going to be a casual trip down memory lane, exploring how Atelier has evolved over the years in terms of character design, storytelling, and gameplay. Atelier is a long-running series of role-playing games developed by Gust since 1997. Unlike many save-the-world RPG epics, these games center on alchemy, finding and combining ingredients to craft items, and they usually feature young female protagonists in charming, lighthearted adventures. We're skipping the spin-offs and focusing on the main series, grouped by their sub-series. I'm going to butcher these, by the way, but here they are: Salburg, Gramnad, Iris, Khemia, Arland, Dusk, Mysterious, and Secret. If you've ever been curious about how these cozy crafting-centric series grew and changed over the decades, stick around, because we're going to start at the very beginning, with the origins. Atelier's humble beginnings, the Salburg trilogy. Atelier Marie came out in 1997. The very first Atelier game was a humble 2D adventure that established the series' core formula. You play as Marie, an alchemy student given 5 years to prove herself to save her workshop from being closed. The gameplay introduced time management. You wander out to gather ingredients, brew potions and items in your workshop, and take on quests, all while an in-game clock ticks away. This time limit added a bit of pressure. You had to plan your days carefully, but it was fairly lenient and meant to encourage multiple playthroughs for different endings. The story of Atelier Marie was super lighthearted. There's no Dark Lord or world-ending crisis. Marie's biggest foe is basically her final exam. This whimsical, low-stakes approach was intentional. The creator, Shinichi Yoshiki, specifically wanted a lighthearted fantasy vibe. And thanks to artist Kohime Osei's cute character designs, the game's world felt like a warm fairy tale. It's fun to think that this little game about a struggling alchemy student ended up spawning a massive franchise. Atelier Marie's success made it one of Gust's flagship titles going forward. The Salburg trilogy continued with Atelier Ellie, The Alchemist of Salburg 2, and Atelier Lily, The Alchemist of Salburg 3. Ellie game didn't stray far from Marie's template. You play a young aspiring alchemist, Ellie, on a quest to help her hometown, with familiar item crafting and time limits in play. There are a few tweaks. Ellie introduced a day-night cycle, which made time management even more important, and it offered more alchemy recipes to experiment with. Atelier Lily, despite being titled as the third game, was actually a prequel set years before Marie. It followed Lily as she attempts to find an alchemy academy in Salburg. By Lily's release on the PS2, the graphics improved, but gameplay-wise, it was still the familiar loop of gathering, synthesizing, and turn-based battles. In other words, the Salburg era refined the cozy formula, but didn't rock the boat too much. These early games remained beloved in Japan. There's even an Atelier Marie remake, which I have, by the way, which I will be playing at some point. The Western players wouldn't get a taste of Atelier until a bit later. Still, the foundation was set. Alchemy, time limits, and slice-of-life storytelling were the heart of the Atelier identity from the start. And now, as we move on to the Gramnad series, we see new adventures and experiments. By early 2000, Gust started experimenting with the Atelier formula, the Gramnad duology. Atelier Judy and Atelier Violet took the alchemists on new kind of adventures. Atelier Judy, the alchemist of Gramnad, was a pretty wild premise. The heroine, Judy, accidentally brews a time travel potion and flings herself 200 years into the future. Suddenly, this cozy alchemy game had a sci-fi twist, as Judy tries to find a way back to her own time. Gameplay-wise, Judy's installment added some notable upgrades. It introduced proper dungeon exploration and streamlined some RPG mechanics. One big addition was the concept of item traits. Every synthesized item could carry special properties, a feature that became a key staple in later games. So Judy's adventure made Atelier a bit more RPG-like while still keeping the alchemy front and center. Atelier Violet, the alchemist of Gramnad 2, switched things up even more. Violet, or Vio, isn't trying to save the world or return to the future. She's a small-town girl who refuses to move away from her family, and instead decides to open her own item shop to prove she can make it on her own. The whole game is about helping Vio run her shop for a few years until her parents return to check on her. Talk about daddy issues. This setup shifted the gameplay focus. Alchemy is still there, but it's not quite as central as before. You spend a lot of time managing the shop, stocking goods, hiring staff, chatting with customers, almost like an alchemy shop simulator. You can still go on adventures outside the town to gather rare materials or complete quests, but VO's success really comes down to how well you manage and grow the business. With 11 different endings based on your store's prosperity, it encouraged replaying to see all the outcomes. These Gramnad games were never released in English, but they're fascinating because Gust was clearly testing how far they could stretch the Atelier concept. Whether it was time travel drama or entrepreneurial slice of life, Atelier was proving adaptable while keeping its signature craft gameplay intact. Now we get to a JRPG detour, the Irish trilogy, and Khemia. Now before we start this section, you are going to have to excuse me. I do not know how to pronounce Khemia, so I'm going to butcher it each time. Just a forewarning. Around 2004, the Atelier series took a bit of a detour into a more traditional JRPG territory with the Irish series. If you were an English-speaking fan, Atelier Irish Eternal Mana might have been your first encounter with Atelier, since it was the first game in the franchise to get an official worldwide release. And you might have been surprised at how different it felt. Atelier Irish shifts the focus from small-town alchemist to a grand adventure. You play as Klein, a young alchemist who teams up with a spunky warrior, Lita, and other friends to ultimately save the world of Regalzine from destruction. Yes, world saving. A far cry from synthesizing pies to keep your workshop open. Alchemy in Iris is mostly there for lore and side mechanics. It takes a back seat to the combat story. The battle system, while still turn-based, got spiced up with features like character positioning and team formations and more strategic fights. It almost feels like Gust takes on Final Fantasy-style gameplay here, likely an effort to broaden the series' appeal overseas. Atelier Iris 2 continued down the JRPG path. It's actually a prequel story set in a different world, featuring two protagonists, a swordsman, Felt, and his alchemist friend, Vise. The game lets you swap between them. Felt goes out on classic RPG quests fighting monsters, while Vise stays in a base town and synthesizes items for Felt to use. This was a neat way to integrate alchemy into the story. One character does the adventuring, and the other supports from behind the scenes with crafted gear. You also get to explore two parallel worlds in Iris 2, hopping between the idyllic Eden and the war-torn Belkide. It was an ambitious sequel with more complex narratives than the first Iris. And then came Atelier Iris 3, Grand Phantasm, which switched things up to a mission-based structure. Iris 3 is set in a single city with a guild, and you take on quests that send you into various magical realms called Altar Worlds. Each Altar World mission has a timer, a ticking clock that adds urgency as you delve into dungeons. If time runs out, you get booted out and have to try again. The game feels almost like a dungeon crawler meets Atelier. And interestingly, its story is mostly standalone, despite the Iris name. It isn't a direct continuation of Iris 1 and 2's plot. By the end of the Iris trilogy, it was evident Gust wasn't afraid to break the mold. These titles were more combat-heavy and narrative-driven, appealing to general JRPG fans. But some of the classic Atelier heart, the pure alchemy focus, and everyday charm, did take a bit of a backseat during this era, as we see now coming into 2025. Parallel to the Iris games, Gust released another pair of titles often considered part of the Atelier lineage. Khemia, Alchemist of Alrevis, and Khemia 2, Fall of Alchemy. The Khemia games essentially ask, what if Harry Potter, but alchemy? They're set in an alchemy academy, and you follow students through school life, complete with class assignments and exams. In Khemia 1, the protagonist is Vane, a shy boy with mysterious past who gets invited to study at Alrevis Academy. The game unfolds over several in-game school years. Each chapter, you attend a class, fulfill alchemy assignments, and go on quests. It's a delightful blend of JRPG and life sim. But alchemy is back to being a core gameplay element. You craft items to complete assignments and help classmates. Khemia's combat system was also robust, featuring a fast-paced turn-based battle system with team assist moves, making fights flashy and fun. Khemia 2 offered two separate playable protagonists and storylines. You choose to play as either Reyes or Ulrika, each with their own party and perspectives. This effectively doubled the game's content and gave it some replay value, since the two paths only fully converged at the end. The school schedule structure remained, with the game divided into classes and then free time in between to explore and craft. By the end of Khemia 2, Gust had put out about 8 Atelier-related RPGs in 5 years. I really wish gaming was like this nowadays. While each game introduced its own ideas, you could tell the developers were iterating rather than overhauling. Atelier had found its comfort zone, balancing story, combat, and alchemy, and future games would continue refining that balance. Which brings us to the Arland era, a modern renaissance. Fast forward to 2009, and Atelier underwent a renaissance with the Arland series. On the PlayStation 3, Atelier Rorona, the Alchemist of Arland, kicked off this beloved trilogy with a return to the series' roots, now in vibrant 3D graphics. You play as Rorona, a clumsy young alchemist tasked with providing her workshop's worth to save it from being shut down by the kingdom. Sound familiar? Rorona's setup is basically a modern callback to Atelier Marie's Saved Atelier story. Over 3 in-game years, you have to complete alchemy orders for the king to show that your workshop contributes to the town. So yes, time limits and quarterly goals made a comeback. The gameplay in Rorona is a stripped-back experience compared to the detours of Iris. Gust intentionally made it feel like the classic titles. They focused on alchemy, gathering, and getting to know the townsfolk. Still, it brought the series into the HD era, with a charming new art style. The characters in Arland were designed by the artist Mel Kashida, who gave them a distinct pastel-colored storybook look that attracted many new fans. Looking at you, frilly galleys out there. Rorona had a very goofy personality, and her mentor Astrid was quite the comedian. Rorona was a risk that paid off. It proved Atelier could modernize without losing its soul. After Rorona's success led to Atelier Totoni, the Adventurer of Arland, and Atelier Maruru, the Apprentice of Arland, which together formed a tightly knit trilogy. In Atelier Totori, you play as Rorona's alchemy student Totori, who is on a journey to find her missing mother. This sequel expanded the scope beyond one city. Totori travels across the world map, discovering new towns and dungeons, which made the adventure feel grander. The gameplay remained similar to Rorona's, but Totori emphasized exploration more, since you had the entire kingdom's frontiers to chart rather than just one city. It was really rewarding to see familiar faces like older, more confident Rorona mentoring Totori, showing how characters grew over the in-game years. And then came Maruru. Princess Maruru is a headstrong girl who decides to learn alchemy from Totori in order to develop a small rural kingdom of Arls. The stakes in Atelier Maruru feel higher in a civic sense. You're literally using alchemy to build roads, schools, and improve the lives of your citizens, with a goal of reaching a population of 30,000 within 3 years. If you fail to hit the growth target, Maruru's father will forbid her from practicing alchemy, so the pressure is on. Time management in Maruru is crucial, arguably more punishing than in previous games, because every building project, every journey, every synthesis could eat up precious days. On the gameplay side, Maruru introduced the cost turn battle system, where characters' speed stats determined turn order and frequency. It was a slick tweak that made battles more dynamic, since a fast character could act twice before a slower one. A concept similar to the turn order system in games like Final Fantasy X, and what we're seeing now in Clair Obscure Expedition 33. By the time you finish Maruru, the 3 Arland games weave one continuous storyline, which spanned about a decade in their in-game world time, which was the first in the series to have such a direct continuity. The Arland trilogy was widely praised for its lovable characters, humorous and heartfelt story, and solid gameplay loop. In fact, these games became many Western players' gateway into Atelier. Years later, Gust even returned to Arland for the 4th entry, Atelier Lilua, in 2019, starring Rorona's daughter, but we'll get back to that in a bit. One thing is for sure, Arland firmly re-established the Atelier series and set the stage for even more innovation in the years to come. And this brings us to the Dusk trilogy, and this takes a little shift in tone. After the sunny optimism of Arland, the next trio of games, the Dusk series, from 2012 to 2014, took Atelier's story and art in a slightly darker, more wistful direction. The world of Dusk is defined by decay and mystery, giving these games a more somber, post-apocalyptic charm, albeit a very gentle apocalypse. It's still an Atelier game. Atelier Aisha, the Alchemist of Dusk, opens the trilogy with Aisha, a herbalist who's searching for her missing sister, Neo, in a land slowly being overtaken by ruins and twilight. The stakes still feel personal. It's sisterly love that drives Aisha, but the setting makes everything more dark. As you travel, you learn about the lost art of alchemy and the cause of the quote-unquote dusk that threatens the world's fertility. Compared to Arland's candy-colored fields, Dusk's environments have a faded beauty, and the art, by illustrator Hidari, uses a softer, earthly color palette that I absolutely adore. From a gameplay perspective, alchemy comes back to the forefront of Aisha. Crafting items consumes in-game days again, so the time management element returns. Meanwhile, the battle system got a complete overhaul. Dusk's game allows characters to move around the field during fights, positioning themselves for tactical advantages. It's still turn-based, but positioning adds a new layer. For example, you can have an alchemist hang back out of enemy range while a warrior moves up to guard them. This change made combat more engaging than the static formations of Arland. Aisha's journey, full of bittersweet hope, set a new tone that showed Atelier could handle deeper themes: loss, legacy, environmental decay, while still remaining uplifting. Which brings us to the next installment in the series. Atelier Escha and Logi, Alchemists of the Dusk Sky, is the second in the Dusk trilogy. It has a few notable distinctions. First, it introduced dual protagonists in a mainline Atelier for the first time since the spin-offs. You can choose to play as Escha, a bubbly girl who specializes in traditional alchemy, or Logi, a reserved young man who uses more technical, modern alchemy tools. They both work for a government research department, helping their town strive in an era of dusk. Gust did something clever here. The overall story is the same regardless of who you pick. Escha and Logi partner up either way to build an airship and investigate the mysterious floating ruins in the sky, but certain events and ending scenes differ, giving you a little incentive to replay the game as the other characters see their perspective. It's basically two sides of the same coin rather than two divergent storylines. Escha and Logi's gameplay refines Aisha's systems. Combat and alchemy are similar, perhaps a bit more polished, and it leans even more on character relationships and story. By this point, Gust was putting these games out almost yearly, so they smartly reused a lot of engine and assets from Aisha, focusing on storytelling to keep players hooked. I love this kind of game design, by the way. It's perfect. Fun fact, Atelier Aisha and Logi was popular enough to even get a short anime adaptation, which shows how the entry appealed to fans. It might help that Logi was the first playable male protagonist in the main Atelier games released in the West. A notable change, because at this time in the West, males dominated the video game market. The trilogy concludes with Atelier Shali, Alchemists of the Dusk Sea. Shali is actually short Shalistira and Shalouette. I'm butchering these, by the way, guys. I'm going to butcher these names. Just put that out there. The two different heroines you can play as. This time, the dual protagonists lead separate story paths. Shalistira is a traveler from a remote village on a mission to save her home from a worsening drought, whereas Shalouette is a local city girl striving to become a successful alchemist and help her friends. Their personalities and goals contrast nicely. One is duty-bound and serious, and the other is more carefree and entrepreneurial. The game's events unfold differently depending on who you choose, until their paths eventually converge. In terms of gameplay, Shali made some controversial simplifications. Notably, it removed the time limit completely, allowing players to take their sweet time to finish the story. This was a first in the series, a decision that some fans loved and others felt made the games too easygoing. The structure became more open-ended. Instead of fixed deadlines, you had a life task system where you complete various character-driven objectives at your own pace to help progress the story. While freeing players from time anxiety was relaxing, it also meant a bit of the classic Atelier challenge was gone. By the end of Shali, some players felt the repetitive nature of the annual release creeping in, and sales were dipping, signaling that it might be time for the series to reinvent itself again. Overall, the Dusk trilogy stands out for its moodier storytelling and evolution of mechanics. It brought a more mature and reflective tone. It was a gamble that added a lot of depth for the Atelier universe. Which brings us to the next era, the Mysterious trilogy and Lulua. The next era, the Mysterious series, from 2015 to 2017, with a surprise 2022 sequel, marks another refresh for Atelier. This is when I got into the series. These games feel like a soft reboot, with new characters and big shakeup in gameplay philosophy. Atelier Sophie, this was the first one I played, the Alchemist of the Mysterious Book, kicks it off by doing something no Atelier game had done before, completely removing the time limit system. That's right, in Atelier Sophie, you can take as long as you want to craft, explore, and follow the story with no looming deadline hanging over you. This was a deliberate change to make the series more accessible to newcomers, who found the time constraints stressful. The story in Sophie is incredibly charming. You play as Sophie, a young amateur alchemist who discovers a talking book, Platschta, that has lost its memories. Sophie's goal is to help restore Platschta's pages, which contain alchemy knowledge. and in doing so, improve her own alchemy skills. It's a very cozy, low-pressure narrative, more about personal growth and friendship than any world-threatening crisis. With the new generation of hardware, this was on the PS4, Gust also overhauled the gameplay system. Atelier Sophie introduces an alchemy system that plays out like a puzzle minigame. When synthesizing, you place ingredients elements on a grid, almost like Tetris pieces, trying to optimally fill space and trigger bonuses. It added a fun bit of spatial brain teasing to the familiar recipe crafting, making alchemy more engaging than just selecting items from a menu. Sophie also brought in a friendship system that rewards you for interacting with characters. The closer you are to your friends in town, the more events and more gameplay benefits, like combat, skills, or crafting bonuses you unlock. All these changes really refreshed the series. I remember Sophie's game feeling like a warm hug. It wasn't about racing the clock, just about enjoying the journey and maxing out items creations. It set a new, more relaxed tone. It was nice. It was a very, very delightful adventure. Next comes Atelier Ryza, The Alchemist and the Mysterious Journey. This took the freedom idea even further. Ryza is unique in that it's a road trip RPG, kind of like Final Fantasy 15. The alchemist Ryza leaves her isolated hometown and travels across a sprawling world, experiencing a journey of discovery. Unlike Sophie, Ryza does reintroduce a time constraint, but only for a specific goal. You have 1 year of in-game time to collect enough alchemy knowledge, by earning letters of recommendation, to qualify for the official alchemist exam. That 1 year time limit gives Ryza a bit of an old school pressure in the first half. But once you accomplish that and pass the exam, the time limit is lifted and the game lets you explore indefinitely in the second half. What's notable about Ryza is its open-ended world design. It was the most non-linear Atelier game to date. You have large, interconnected field maps, and you can choose which region to explore and which alchemists to visit in order to gather those letters of recommendation. It almost felt open world, or at least less constrained than the previous games, which usually revolved around a single town hub. I love the sense of adventure in Ryza. It married Atelier's crafting with a genuine feeling of exploration and wanderlust. It was anew for the series. The third game, Atelier Lydie and Suelle, The Alchemists and the Mysterious Paintings, brings the focus back to a single city, but adds a magical twist. Twin sisters, Lydie and Suelle, are novice alchemists who discover mystical paintings that serve as portals to other worlds. Each painting world has its own environment full of ingredients and monsters, effectively giving the game a fun way to include diverse landscapes. It's like Mario 64, you jump into the paintings. Beyond the girl's hometown, the main objective for Lydie and Sue is to run the best atelier in the kingdom, so they have a more professional motivation pushing them. In addition to uncovering the secrets of these paintings, one cool feature here is that unlike past games, where choosing between two protagonists meant separate routes, Lydie and Suelle are always together, and you could switch control between the twins at any time. They share the story and complement each other's personalities. Lydie is the calm, bookish one, while Sue is brash and energetic. This made the dual protagonist concept more integrated than, say, Escha and Logi. In terms of gameplay, Lydie and Sue continue to refine the Mysterious series systems. No time limits at all, a painting hopping mission structure, and deep item crafting with puzzle grid alchemy. It was a solid conclusion to the trilogy, though by this point, fans were eager for the next big step forward. Speaking of next steps, 2019 was an interesting year for Atelier. Gust surprised us by releasing Atelier Lulua, the Scion of Arland, in a brand new game that would kick off the next saga. Atelier Lulua is technically part of the Arland series. It's essentially Arland 4, featuring Lulua, the daughter of Rorona, as the protagonist. Even though it was a nostalgic trip with returning characters and the familiar Arland Kingdom setting, Lulua's gameplay took advantage of the lessons learned from the Mysterious games, dropping the old time limits completely, and adopting modern quality of life improvements. Lulua finds a mysterious book, and only she can read it, guiding her to improve her alchemy, which is a nice nod to Sophie's talking book mechanic. For fans of Arland, Lulua was a love letter and a welcome epilogue that seamlessly blended a bit of new into the old. But the next 2019 release truly ushered Atelier into its new era, which we'll dive into now. This brings us to the Secret Saga, Ryza's breakout trilogy. In 2019, Atelier Ryza, Ever Darkness, and the Secret Hideout arrived, and it became a breakout hit that elevated the Atelier series to new heights. Thick thighs do save franchises. This game begins the Secret trilogy, named for the word secret in all of its titles. So what made Atelier Ryza so special? For starters, it introduced us to Rosalind Stout, aka Ryza, who quickly became the most popular protagonist ever. She even gets her own anime adaptation later on. Ryza is a charismatic, energetic girl who starts off feeling bored with her quiet island life and yearns for adventure beyond her village. Along with her childhood friends, she sets out on a summer escapade and leads her to the art of alchemy, and ultimately to foiling a threat to her home. The story has a charming coming-of-age feel. It's about a group of friends chasing dreams and getting into trouble. This relatable, nostalgic vibe resonates with a lot of players, including me. I love this. I loved Ryza. But Ryza's success isn't just about story. Gust made some of the biggest gameplay updates in the series' history with this title. The notable change in Atelier Ryza is the combat system overhaul. They implemented a hybrid, real-time turn-based battle system. In previous games, when a battle started, time essentially froze outside of turn actions. In Ryza, time flows continuously even as you navigate menus. Enemies won't politely wait forever while you pick your next move. Each character can only act on their turn. But if you hesitate, enemies might attack because the clock is ticking. This injects some sense of urgency and action into fights while still keeping the strategic turn-based core. Additionally, things like the old MP, magic points, were replaced with a shared pool of action points that accumulated in battle and are spent to use skills. You could even queue up powerful moves by saving AP or unleashing combos by coordinating party members' actions in real time. It made battles feel faster and more cinematic. Many fans, even those who preferred the old style, found this new system refreshing once they got used to it. It was probably the most dynamic Atelier combat system in their history. Exploration in Ryza was another leap forward. The game featured more open, lush environments than previous titles, with a day-night cycle and lovely graphics that really showed off the natural beauty of fields, forests, and ruins. Gust also added new traversal abilities in Ryza 2. For example, they gave Ryza the ability to swim underwater, to discover materials and even hidden aquatic dungeons, as well as tools like a grappling hook to reach new areas. These additions significantly changed how one explored the Atelier world. Suddenly you're diving, climbing, and finding treasure in every nook and cranny. By Ryza 3, Alchemists of the End and the Secret Key, the developers went even further and created a true open-world Atelier. All the regions are seamlessly connected with no loading screens, letting you walk or ride mounts across vast maps. It's the kind of freedom we could only dream about back in the Rorona days. Atelier 3 also features the largest cast in the series' history. Up to 11 playable characters can join your party over the course of the game, which is a testament to how far the storytelling has come. It juggles a big ensemble of returning favorites and new faces, giving a satisfying send-off to Ryza's journey. Speaking of story evolutions, the Secret Trilogy is the first Atelier to follow the same protagonist across multiple games. We literally watch Ryza grow from a reckless village girl in Game 1 to an aspiring scholar venturing to the royal capital in Ryza 2, to a mature, renowned alchemist facing a world-altering mystery in Ryza 3. This continuity allowed for deeper character development than the series had ever seen. For instance, Ryza's personality becomes more confident and reflective, and we see the long-term impact of her actions on her friends and hometown. It's a rewarding payoff for fans who have been with her since the start. And it doesn't hurt that Ryza's character design generated a lot of buzz. Her modern, stylish look, and yes, her famously thick thighs. I'm very glad in my research that thick thighs were brought up everywhere when talking about the Ryza series. Very popular. Probably drew in more than a few curious new players. By 2020, Atelier Ryza has reported as the best-selling single title in the franchise history. And of 2023, the series as a whole reached over 7.5 million units sold worldwide, a milestone that seemed far back when Atelier was a niche Japan-only gem. As a longtime fan, it's awesome to see Atelier finally getting its time in the spotlight. In this current day and age, we have Atelier Khemia, but I won't get into that yet because we still don't know where that series is going to take us. It might be a one-shot game, it might be a trilogy, it might be a duo game. We do not know. I won't get into that yet. I will save that for another video when all of the games in the Khemia era are out. But I really like the darker tones they introduced in Khemia, and I really like the emphasis they put on villains in Khemia. I do not like the backseat of the alchemy system that they put in Khemia, but we'll get into that in a separate video. Looking back, it is impressive to see how far the Atelier series has continued to evolve while staying true to its heart. In terms of gameplay, we've seen the alchemy system grow from a straightforward recipe list in the 90s to a complex, almost mini-game puzzle of its own. Each era introduced tweaks, traits on items from Judy's game that deepened crafting, a cost-turn battle system from Maruru's that made fights snappier, position-based combat in the Dusk games that added strategy, and the full-on real-time combat of Ryza that brought new energy. Exploration expanded from simple town fields to entire continents to open worlds. Yet throughout, the series never lost its focus on gathering and crafting as the core loop. That satisfying gameplay of collect stuff, make stuff, use stuff, which scratches a very special itch for us item hoarders. When it comes to storytelling and characters, Atelier has always marched to its own drum. It pioneered having mostly female leads in JRPGs, long before that became more common. And these heroines have evolved from relatively passive daydreamers like Marie and Rorona, who mostly reacted to the tasks given to them, to more proactive and complex characters like Maru, Sophie, and Ryza, who set their own goals and drive the story forward. I really wish Western audiences take a beat from these strong female characters and really implement that into their own stories in this day and age. It really seems like they capture the feel of a female character much better than we have seen in recent Western releases. The tone has shifted from each game to game too, from the comedic carefree slice of life that Salburg and Arland bring, to the adventurous JRPG melodrama of Iris, to the reflective melancholy of Dusk, and back to the spirited balance in the Mysterious series and the Secret games. Atelier is unafraid to be lighthearted and wholesome. Often, the conflicts are resolved by understanding, knowledge, and a little magic rather than brute force. Even when the series dabbles in darker themes, it maintains a sense of optimism and friendship. Playing an Atelier game always feels comforting to me, like hanging out with good friends in a cozy workshop filled with the scent of imaginary herbs. As a passionate fan who's followed the series for years, I can't overstate how joyful it is to see each new entry build on its rich legacy. Whether it's through character design tweaks, or through quality of life improvements that make crafting more fun than ever. Gust shows a clear love for iterating and improvement. Atelier has carved out a special niche in the JRPG genre. It's the comfort food of games, continually serving up creativity, charm, and alchemy wonder. And it's still going strong. With new titles on the horizon, I'm excited to see how this series will surprise us all next. Thank you guys for joining me on this journey through the evolution of the Atelier series. It's been really fun doing all this research. I've only played a handful of the Atelier games myself. I have not played them all, especially the Japanese-only titles. The older titles may come back on the channel for retrospectives. I really enjoy the Atelier series, and I'm really glad that I did this research because I learned a lot myself. I've always wanted to know the history of the Atelier series, and I'm glad to share it with you guys as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.